My mother-in-law made my 8-year-old daughter scrub the floor. Girls need to learn their place, she said with a smirk that still makes my stomach turn. Cleaning builds character, something boys don't need, she added. When I told her to stop, she didn't apologize. She stood tall, proud, and said, "This is how we raised proper women in my day. Besides, what are you going to do about it?" I didn't give her a speech about dignity or equality. I simply walked to my daughter's room, packed her little backpack with trembling hands, and we left. No tears, no goodbyes. What I did next left her begging for forgiveness. Part 1. The first thing I heard when I walked through Margaret Langston's door that Tuesday afternoon was the sound of a wet rag being dragged across the floor, and my daughter's soft sniffles. My 8-year-old daughter, Ava, was on her hands and knees, scrubbing the kitchen tiles with a soaked cloth. Her pink dress was soaked with cleaning fluid. Her little fingers were raw, red from scrubbing. Her dark hair had fallen loose from its ponytail, clinging to her flushed cheeks. Her cousins, Owen and Ryan, were lounging on the couch, completely oblivious. Their video game volume was blaring like a war zone. My chest clenched. Ava looked up when she saw me, her face lighting up, but she didn't stop cleaning, not even for a second. Her eyes told me everything. She wanted to run to me, but she was afraid of being scolded. I rushed to her and gently helped her to her feet. "Sweetheart, what's going on here?" That's when Margaret appeared. She walked out from the living room like nothing was wrong, silver hair pinned into place, not a strand out of order. Her smile was that same tight, smug twist I had endured for 9 years of being married to her son, Daniel Wells. "Oh Naomi," she said with fake cheer. Perfect timing. "Ava's nearly done with the floors." "Done?" My voice shook as I held my daughter close. "She's 8, Margaret. Why is she scrubbing the floors while Owen and Ryan are playing?" Margaret's chuckle was sharp like a knife. "Girls need to learn their place early, dear. Cleaning builds character. Boys don't need that. They have more important things to develop, like their minds and leadership." I stared at her, unable to believe what I was hearing. She waved toward her grandsons, who didn't even look up from their game. "They'll be men one day. Leaders. They don't need to waste time scrubbing floors. Ava's learning valuable skills. Someday, when she's keeping a house for her husband, she'll be grateful." Ava tugged at my sleeve. Her eyes welled up with fresh tears. "Mommy," she whispered, "I've been cleaning since breakfast." Owen spilled juice on the carpet, and Grandma said it's my job to clean it up, because I'm a girl. My hands turned into fists at my sides. "Margaret, this stops now. Ava is here to spend time with her cousins, not to be your maid." Margaret crossed her arms. "And what exactly are you going to do about it? This is my house, my rules. If you don't like them, you're welcome to leave early." That smug smile, that condescending tilt of her chin, the way she dismissed my daughter as if she was beneath her grandsons, it was a moment of painful, awful clarity. I wasn't going to argue. I wasn't going to shout. I was done pretending. "You're absolutely right," I said calmly, surprising her. "Come on, Ava. Let's get your things." Margaret's lips curled in satisfaction. She thought she'd won. Ava scrambled to gather her bag. She already looked lighter, freer, knowing she could leave this house behind. "Say goodbye to your cousins, sweetheart," I said gently. "Bye, Owen. Bye, Ryan," Ava called cheerfully. Neither boy looked up, too lost in their game to care. Margaret followed us to the front door, practically glowing. "I hope you understand, Naomi. I only want to raise Ava right. Jason turned out so well, didn't he? It's because we believed in structure and tradition." I buckled Ava into her seat, looked Margaret in the eye, and said, "Oh, I understand perfectly. Thank you for making everything so clear." The drive home was quiet. Ava hummed softly in the back seat, as if the morning's pain was already fading. But I couldn't shake the image of her, scrubbing that floor like a servant while 2 boys her age played freely. That night, once Ava was fast asleep, I sat at the kitchen table. My coffee had gone cold. Daniel, my husband, was working late again. At least that's what he said. Either way, I was alone, with enough space and silence to finally do what I'd been putting off for months. I opened my laptop. I started with our joint bank account. Daniel was an accountant. He always handled the money, said it was easier that way. I'd trusted him. I focused on my freelance design work and raising our daughter. But tonight, something told me to look deeper. That's when I saw it. For the past 3 years, there had been automatic payments of $2,847 every month to a name I didn't recognize, Evergreen Property Group. I frowned. I'd assumed most of the family expenses Daniel mentioned were for school trips, gifts, groceries. But this? Over $2,800 a month for 3 years? That's more than $100,000. I cross-checked the account number with public property records. My stomach dropped. The address belonged to Margaret's house, the very house she forced Ava to scrub. All those years I stayed up late working, accepting Daniel's excuses for why we couldn't take a vacation, why we couldn't fix the broken bathroom tiles, and he was secretly paying his mother's mortgage. With our money, I felt sick. like the air had left the room. But that was only the beginning. And then used our money, my money, to keep paying for it. And she had the nerve to lecture me about raising Ava properly? The next morning, I dropped Ava off again and drove to the public library. I needed more information, and I didn't want Daniel to know what I was doing. He often checked the home computer's history. For 6 hours, I read through legal archives, property cases, and similar elder fraud incidents. And by the end of the day, what I discovered made those mortgage payments look like small change compared to the storm I was about to unleash. This was no longer about house chores or money. This was about truth. This was about justice. And it was just the beginning. Part 2. Margaret Langston's obsession with the casino wasn't about luck or fun. It was a routine, a ritual, a second life she lived behind the curtains of family dinners and polite conversations. Her credit card records told a chilling story. For the past 18 months, she had visited the Golden Phoenix Casino every Tuesday and Friday without fail, like clockwork. And each time, she'd spent anywhere between $800 and $1,200, sums that added up like storm clouds collecting over still waters. But what sent my heart into a tailspin wasn't just the regular gambling. It was what funded it. I found credit card statements in Daniel's name, cards he didn't even know existed, 3 different business cards, all filed using his social security number, and each one bearing a signature that eerily resembled his. But I knew my husband's handwriting, and I knew that these weren't his. They were practiced, rehearsed. Margaret had been copying his handwriting, studying it, perfecting it, enough to fool bank representatives. The fraudulent documents listed Daniel as the owner of a company called Caldwell Fix-It Pros, a business that didn't exist outside of paper, a ghost entity conjured by Margaret to open lines of credit. She'd even gone so far as to register the company with a fake tax ID and license. It was elaborate, strategic, almost surgical in its execution, but it didn't stop there. Every month, Margaret wrote herself a $2,000 check labeled as consulting fees, drawn from this fake business. That money was funneled directly into a separate account, an account that matched the transactions at Golden Phoenix Casino to the dollar. She was paying herself a salary, out of her son's credit, and blowing it all at the blackjack tables. When I printed the evidence, my hands trembled, my pulse throbbed in my ears. This wasn't just manipulation. This wasn't just borrowing from family. This was fraud, identity theft, a criminal enterprise wrapped in pearls and passive-aggressive smiles. On the way home from the library, I stopped at a quiet cafe to think. I needed a moment, a breath, just one space where the weight of what I had uncovered wouldn't crush me. And that's when I saw her, Margaret Langston, at a corner table, her silver hair pinned in place, makeup too heavy for this time of day. She was hunched over a pile of papers, loan documents, judging by the layout. I ordered a coffee and quietly slipped into a table near hers, close enough to observe without drawing attention. A man in an expensive suit sat across from her, sliding papers across the table. Her hand shook as she signed them. Her face was pale, strained, like she hadn't slept in days. When the man finally left, Margaret stayed seated, her eyes locked on the documents with a look I hadn't seen before. Not smug, not superior, desperate. I knew that look. I stood and approached. "Margaret," I said smoothly, "what a surprise running into you here." Her head snapped up. Panic flickered across her face. She fumbled with the papers, trying to cover them up, but I had already seen the heading. Second mortgage application, Caldwell Property, Margaret Langston. I took the seat across from her, uninvited. My voice was even, but my gaze was sharp. "Interesting, considering Daniel and I have already been paying the first mortgage on your house." She blanched. I don't know what you're talking about." "Yes, you do," I said. "Just like you know about Caldwell Fix-It Pros. And the $2,000 a month you've been consulting yourself with using Daniel's name. The credit cards, the forged signature, the fake company. I know it all." Her face lost all remaining color. "How did you find out?" "I'm very good at research, Margaret. It's part of what makes me successful in my work. You've been using the money I earned to gamble and lie and steal, while lecturing me about values." Her facade cracked. "You don't understand," she said, voice trembling. "I got in too deep. I thought I could fix it, but now the people I owe." "Who do you owe?" I interrupted. "There was a poker game," she confessed, eyes darting around the room. "High stakes. I thought I could win it back. I thought I could pay off the casino losses." Her voice faltered. "You've been involved in illegal gambling." She nodded miserably. "I owe them $40,000. They said if I don't pay by the end of the month, they'll come after my family." Suddenly, it all made sense. Margaret wasn't just an addict. She was in with dangerous people, loan sharks, perhaps, and she was trying to take out a second mortgage to buy her way out. But because she had made Daniel a co-owner through her fraudulent paperwork, that second mortgage would make him liable. I leaned forward. "Margaret, do you understand the damage you've done? this isn't just a family squabble. This is identity theft, forgery, wire fraud, loan fraud, and you've endangered Ava and Daniel in the process. I was trying to protect them, she whispered. By committing more crimes? She scoffed. The police can't protect us from people like this. I stood to leave, but she grabbed my wrist. Please, Naomi, I know I've made mistakes, but if you go public with this, if you expose me, those men will hurt Daniel and Ava. Is that worth your revenge? That did it. I yanked my arm free. You've already endangered Ava, I said coldly. You used her name in your insurance fraud. You made her scrub your floors while you gambled away our money. You've risked everything, not for family, but for your addiction. Don't you dare try to guilt me with protecting Ava. I walked out, leaving her sitting at that table, staring down at her doomed second mortgage. That night, I laid out the bank statements, forged signatures, and credit card records across the kitchen table. When Daniel walked in, the color drained from his face. We need to talk, I said quietly. He scanned the documents. Naomi, I can explain. No. Explain how you've been paying your mother's mortgage behind my back for 3 years. With over $100,000 of our money. She needed help, he said defensively. And you make good money. That's not the point, I snapped. You made these decisions alone. You lied every time I asked about vacations, school expenses, even replacing the cracked bathroom tiles. And all this time, you were funding her lies. Daniel sank into a chair. She would have lost the house. The house she manipulated Aunt Florence into giving her? I shot back. He looked up, startled. What? I told him everything, about Gloria, about Florence's confusion, about Margaret's pressure. With every word, his expression darkened. I didn't know, he whispered. She told me Florence gave it willingly, because of all the caregiving she did. She lied to you, Daniel, and you believed her. You've enabled her all these years. That night, Daniel slept on the couch. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling. How many other secrets had he buried to protect her? I didn't have to wait long to find out. 2 days later, I returned to the research. I started tracing Margaret's financial threads again, and what I found nearly floored me. She didn't just own the house. She also owned a business called Margaret's Kitchen. According to public business licenses, it had existed for 5 years. But Daniel had never mentioned it. Ever. I looked up tax records. Her business reported a healthy income, almost $80,000 last year, but her actual bank account was drowning in debt. More digging revealed something worse. Margaret had taken out 3 business loans for Margaret's Kitchen, totaling $45,000. And every single one listed Daniel as the co-signer. She'd used his social security number again. He was legally responsible for her business debt, and he had no idea. The Golden Phoenix Casino withdrawals told the rest of the story. Over 2 years, Margaret had lost nearly $60,000 at the tables. Our mortgage payments weren't saving her. They were freeing her income so she could gamble. I sat back, breathless with rage. This woman, who had lectured me about tradition, made my daughter clean her house, and smiled sweetly at Thanksgiving dinners, was a con artist hiding in pearls. And then my phone rang. A number I didn't recognize. Is this Naomi Wells? A hesitant voice asked. Yes. Who's calling? This is Isabel Grant. I was engaged to your husband about 10 years ago. I froze. Isabel? I know this is strange, she continued quickly, but I've seen your posts on social media. Your daughter looks so much like Daniel. I had to call, because I think Margaret is doing to you what she did to me. What do you mean? She broke us, Isabel said bitterly. She told Daniel I wasn't good enough. She called my boss, told him I was unstable. She humiliated me, undermined me at every turn. I felt sick. She did that? She found out I had student loans and told Daniel I was a burden, that I'd ruin his future. The irony is, I worked 2 jobs. I was trying to build a life with him. And yes, I knew about the gambling. Eleanor, sorry, Margaret's gambling is what caused Daniel's father's heart attack. I stared at the wall as the truth sank in. This wasn't new. Margaret's pattern wasn't a recent crisis. It was a long, calculated legacy. I wasn't the first woman she'd tried to destroy, but I would be the last. Part 3. Rachel, I need to ask you something, I said quietly into the phone. Do you know anything about Margaret ever using Daniel's identity for financial purposes, like loans or credit accounts? There was a sharp pause on the other end, then a short, ragged inhale. She's still doing that? Rachel's voice had a brittle edge, the kind that comes from years of carrying a truth no one believed. Oh no, Naomi, listen to me. Margaret forged his signature on a car loan back when we were together. Daniel didn't want to press charges, he said. She's my mother. But that loan wrecked his credit for years. My husband's credit is in excellent standing now, I said slowly, thinking back on the bank statements and recent loan approvals I'd seen. Everything looked pristine. Then she must have moved the debt around or offloaded it, Rachel said. She's clever like that. She always finds a way to hide the mess. But Naomi, please, protect yourself. Protect Ava. Margaret doesn't stop until she's destroyed everything. She did it to us, she'll do it to you. When I hung up, I sat still for a long time, barely noticing the hum of my coffee machine or the birds chirping outside the window. My pulse thudded quietly in my ears. Margaret Langston's behavior wasn't just toxic in the way some in-laws are difficult. It was orchestrated, a deliberate pattern, methodical, insidious, and refined through decades of practice. She hadn't just driven away Daniel's former fiancé. She hadn't just manipulated Aunt Florence on her deathbed. She hadn't just stolen Daniel's identity and drained our family's resources. She was now turning Ava into unpaid labor, all while lecturing us about proper values. But Rachel's call had given me something valuable, a clue. If Margaret had followed this pattern with Daniel's previous partners, maybe I wasn't the first to document it. Maybe there were others. Other women with stories, with proof. I spent the next day combing through social media, tracking down women I knew had been part of Daniel's past. He'd never hidden his dating history from me. In fact, he spoke kindly of most of them, even if briefly. Many were still loosely connected through mutual friends. It didn't take long. The first woman I contacted was Tara Wynn. They'd dated for just a semester in college. My message was simple. Hi Tara, I'm Naomi Wells, Daniel's wife. I'm reaching out because I'm dealing with some complicated issues involving his mother, Margaret Langston, and I'm wondering if you've ever had an experience with her you're willing to share. Tara replied within an hour. Oh my gosh, you're dealing with her, too, she wrote. That woman made my life hell. I dated Daniel for just 6 months, and during that time, Margaret did everything she could to convince him I was cheating. She fabricated evidence, went through my trash, literally my garbage, to find receipts and twist them into a whole story about where I'd been and who I was seeing. I blinked at the screen, stunned. Margaret hadn't just interfered, she'd stalked, manipulated, and lied. The next ex I reached out to was Natalie Brooks. Her relationship with Daniel had lasted 2 years, and I remember Daniel once told me they'd been serious for a while, but life took them in different directions. Natalie's response left me chilled. Eleanor, excuse me, Margaret, called my employer and accused me of embezzling money, she said during our phone call the next afternoon. She told them she was concerned for Daniel's financial security because he was thinking about proposing. I almost lost my job over it. The accusations were completely fabricated. When I told Daniel what she'd done, he defended her, said she was just being overprotective. I knew then that I couldn't win. Each story pulled back another layer of a disturbing truth. Margaret didn't merely disapprove of the women in her son's life, she actively, deliberately destroyed his relationships. And she did it with a precision that made it nearly impossible to confront directly. But the most disturbing testimony came from Kendra Blake, Daniel's girlfriend in his early 20s. She spoke to me over the phone, her voice quiet but sure. Margaret told everyone that I was pregnant and trying to trap Daniel into marrying me, she said. It wasn't true. I had a scare, yes. I confided in Daniel, and apparently he told her. When the test came back negative, I was relieved. But Margaret used that private information to spin a narrative that I'd had an abortion to manipulate Daniel emotionally. She even called my parents and said I was involved in immoral behavior that would shame their family. I was speechless. What did Daniel say when you told him all this? He didn't believe me, Kendra said bitterly. Margaret was always careful. She framed everything as concern. She'd say things like, I'm just not sure Kendra is the right kind of girl for you, or I've heard rumors that trouble me. Daniel interpreted it as love, as his mother caring about him. He couldn't see the manipulation for what it was. That night, I couldn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling for hours, replaying every conversation, every lie, every mask Margaret had worn to manipulate her son and sabotage his relationships. I wasn't her first target. I might not even be her last, but I would be the one who stopped her. I printed screenshots and notes from my conversations with Rachel, Tara, Natalie, and Kendra. I organized their stories into a timeline. I highlighted patterns. There was no way to ignore the common thread. Margaret Langston wielded guilt, lies, and sabotage like weapons. And her primary target wasn't just me, it was any woman who tried to love her son. Still, I wanted more than stories. I wanted insight. I needed to understand why. So I scheduled a session with Dr. Leona Fraser, a therapist specializing in toxic family systems. Dr. Fraser listened patiently as I explained everything. When I finished, she gave a quiet nod. What you're describing, Naomi, is a classic case of emotional incest, she said. I flinched. I'm sorry, what? It doesn't refer to anything physical, she clarified gently. But when a parent, especially a mother, treats her child as an emotional partner instead of a separate, independent adult, result, it creates a dynamic that mimics the exclusivity of a romantic relationship. Any outside partner becomes a threat to the parent's emotional control. That's why Margaret has gone to such extreme lengths to sabotage Daniel's relationships. I nodded slowly, trying to digest it. But what about the financial manipulation? The gambling? The stolen identity? Dr. Fraser gave a sad smile. Emotional control isn't always enough. By keeping Daniel financially tethered, especially through forged debts or secret liabilities, she ensures he can't fully prioritize anyone else. She becomes the person he must save, again and again. The gambling likely developed as both a stress outlet and an excuse to escalate her financial dependency. Understanding the pathology didn't make me more forgiving. If anything, it solidified my resolve. Margaret wasn't just dangerous, she was compulsive, calculated, and willing to destroy anything that threatened her illusion of control. That evening, I decided to test something. I called Daniel at work and asked him to meet me for lunch the next day. "Is everything okay?" he asked, sounding concerned. "I just want some time with you," I said. "We've both been so busy lately." He agreed. He sounded relieved. That made what I planned next even harder. We met at a quiet restaurant near the river. After we ordered, I eased into the conversation. "Daniel, I've been thinking a lot about Ava lately, about her future, and what kind of woman we want her to grow into." He smiled. "She's already brilliant, strong and funny and curious." "She is," I agreed. "But I'm concerned about some of the messages she's getting, especially when she spends time at your mother's house." Daniel blinked. "What do you mean?" "Last week she told me boys are better at math and girls should focus on being quiet and helpful. That she shouldn't interrupt the men when they're talking." Daniel sighed. "My mother has traditional views. That's just how she was raised. But it's affecting Ava," I pressed. "When she's forced to clean while Owen and Ryan play video games, it sends a message. A damaging one." "She probably volunteered," Daniel said. "Ava's always been eager to help." I studied him carefully. I watched him rationalize his mother's behavior, just as he'd done so many times before. "Daniel," I said softly, "what if I told you your mother has said and done similar things to other women in your life?" He frowned. "What are you talking about?" "I've spoken to some of your exes. Rachel, Tara, Natalie, Kendra. They told me things you need to hear." His face drained of color. "You contacted my ex-girlfriends?" "Yes," I said plainly. "And what they told me proves a pattern of abuse." "Margaret's not abusive," he said, almost automatically. "She's just protective." She called Natalie's employer and accused her of embezzling. She told people Kendra had an abortion just to manipulate you. She went through Tara's trash to manufacture a cheating scandal. Daniel's mouth opened, then closed. He looked like someone who had stepped into sunlight for the first time in years. "Even if those things happen," he said finally, "they were a long time ago. People change. She loves Ava. She would never hurt her." "She is hurting her," I said, "by teaching her to shrink, by stealing from us, by dragging your name through illegal financial schemes." Then I told him about Margaret's meeting at the coffee shop, the second mortgage application, the threats from her creditors. "She says she owes $40,000. She says they'll come after us, you, me, and Ava, if she doesn't pay by the end of the month." Daniel put his head in his hands. "Naomi," he whispered, "what do we do?" Part 4. "We have to stop enabling her, Daniel." My voice was calm, but the words rang with finality. "We cut off every line of financial support. No more bailouts, no more excuses. She needs to face the consequences of her choices. And most importantly, we protect Ava from ever being exposed to Florence's toxicity again." Daniel didn't respond right away. He stared at his untouched plate, the fork in his hand still poised in midair. His eyes were distant, vacant. It was as if he were watching the past unravel in front of him, moment by painful moment. "But what if those people she owes money to are dangerous?" he said finally, voice low, almost afraid to speak it aloud. "What if they come after us? Then we go to the police," I said without hesitation. "We don't solve this by handing Florence more money to throw into the pit of her addiction. That's exactly what she's counting on, that we'll be too scared to do anything else." Daniel dropped his fork. The clatter of metal on porcelain was startling in the quiet restaurant. He looked up at me with something in his eyes I'd never seen before, genuine, paralyzing fear. "Clara," he began, voice barely above a whisper, "there's something I never told anyone, not even Rachel, not even my therapist back in college." My chest tightened. "What is it?" "When I was in high school, there were rumors about my dad's death." He paused, swallowing hard. "People whispered that he didn't die of a heart attack like we were told. They said he took his own life because of gambling debts." The floor seemed to shift beneath me. "What are you saying?" "I never believed it," he said quickly. "I couldn't believe it. I told myself they were just small-town lies. But what if they weren't? What if Mom's gambling problem didn't start last year, or 5 years ago? What if it's been going on for decades, and my dad's death?" He stopped, emotion closing his throat. I reached across the table and took his hand. Daniel, that's a serious accusation. I know, he said, but it would explain so much. Why she's always clung to me like her lifeline. Why she sabotages every relationship I have. Why she's always been so controlling, so needy. Because if she's alone, if she doesn't have someone to pay her debts, the whole house of cards comes crashing down. If Daniel was right, this wasn't just a pattern of toxic behavior. It was potentially fatal. Florence had already destroyed his last engagement. She'd nearly ruined our marriage. And now we were facing the possibility that her addiction had played a role in his father's death. I wasn't going to let her tear apart our family, too. Daniel, we need help, I said, sitting straighter in my seat. Not just therapy, real help, law enforcement, legal advice. This is bigger than just bad family dynamics. This is criminal. He nodded slowly. You're right. That afternoon, we picked Ava up from school together. We sat her down at the kitchen table and tried to soften the fear we both felt in our chests. Ava, sweetheart, I began, keeping my voice calm. We need to talk about Grandma Florence. Her little face went still, eyes wide with suspicion. Am I in trouble? No, honey, you're not in trouble at all, I assured her quickly. But we need to know something very important. Has Grandma Florence ever asked you to keep secrets from Mommy and Daddy? Ava blinked, processing the question. Her eyes moved between Daniel and me. What kind of secrets? Any kind, Daniel said gently. Maybe about someone she talked to, or somewhere she took you, even just something she said to you that she told you not to tell us. There was a pause. Then, slowly, Ava nodded. She told me not to tell you about the man who came to her house, she said in a small voice. Daniel and I exchanged alarmed glances. What man? I asked, keeping my tone even. He was scary, Ava whispered. He had tattoos all over his face. He yelled at Grandma. She gave him some money, but he said it wasn't enough. He said bad words. He made her cry. My blood went ice cold. This wasn't just speculation anymore. The threats Florence had described weren't hypothetical, they were real, and they were showing up at her house while our daughter was there. When did this happen, sweetheart? I asked. Last time I slept over. Grandma said I had to stay in my room and be very quiet until the man left. She said if I told you, you wouldn't let me come visit anymore. Daniel looked like someone had punched the air out of his lungs. Ava, did the man know you were there? She shook her head. I don't think so. I hid in the closet like Grandma told me to. But I could hear him. He said if she didn't pay more money, he'd hurt her family. He said he knew where you lived and where I go to school. That was it. The final straw. Florence hadn't just indoctrinated our daughter with harmful gender roles or used her for unpaid labor. She had placed her directly in harm's way. I turned to Daniel. We're calling the police. He nodded, pale and hollow-eyed. Yes, we are. That night, once Ava was asleep, we sat at our dining room table with two detectives, Detective Alex Navarro from the Financial Crimes Unit, and Detective Nina Park, who specialized in organized crime. We told them everything. Florence's identity theft, her manipulation, the gambling debts, the threats, and Ava's terrifying experience. This is a multifaceted case, Detective Navarro said gravely. It involves fraud, potential racketeering, and now threats against a minor. We'll need to coordinate with the Organized Crime Task Force. Organized crime? Daniel echoed, stunned. Detective Park leaned in. From the description of the man your daughter saw, and the nature of the threats, this could be linked to the Valenti Syndicate. They've been running illegal poker games and loan sharking in this county for years, and they don't take kindly to late payments. What does that mean for our family? I asked, barely able to keep the tremor out of my voice. It means we take immediate precautions, Navarro said. We'll increase patrols around your home and Ava's school, but the best protection we can offer is building a case strong enough to dismantle the operation. You want us to help catch them? Daniel asked, incredulous. We want you to help us document your mother's communications with them, Park clarified. If she's willing to cooperate, she could be an asset. If not, the evidence you've already gathered will be enough to pursue charges. Daniel shook his head bitterly. You don't know my mother. She won't help you. She'll deny everything to avoid going down alone. Which is why your cooperation is so critical, Navarro said. You've already done more than most people in this situation. You've kept documentation. You've come forward. That puts you ahead of the game. The next few days blurred into a haze of legal consultations, safety protocols, and hard conversations with Ava. We told her she wouldn't be visiting Grandma Florence for a while. She didn't cry. She didn't even ask why. Is Grandma Florence a bad person? She asked one night as I tucked her in. Grandma made some very bad choices, I said carefully. Sometimes people we love do things that hurt others, even if they don't mean to. Like when she made me clean while Owen and Ryan played video games? Yes, sweetheart. That wasn't fair to you. She was quiet for a long moment. I'm glad we're not going there anymore, she said finally. I always felt like I had to be perfect around her. Like if I made a mistake, she'd get mad. Tears burned behind behind my eyes. You were never the problem, Ava. Some adults have problems that make them act unfair, but it's not your fault. You're amazing, just the way you are. Will Uncle Daniel be okay? She asked. He's learning some hard truths about his mom, but yes, he's going to be okay. 3 days later, Detective Navarro called. We arrested Florence Langston this morning, he said, but that's not the most important part. What happened? I asked. She immediately offered to cooperate in exchange for a reduced sentence. Apparently, the man who threatened her last week also threatened her grandson, Owen. That was enough to scare her straight, for now. I felt a strange mixture of relief and bitterness. She was finally willing to protect her family, but only after dragging us all through the fire. What does that mean for the charges? She'll still be prosecuted for identity theft, fraud, and endangerment, but her cooperation could help us dismantle the syndicate that's been bleeding this community dry for years. The district attorney is considering a plea deal. That evening, Daniel came home with an unexpected request. She wants to see us, he said quietly. She's in county jail. She asked if we'd visit. No, I said immediately. I'm not bringing Ava anywhere near that place. I meant just us. I studied his face. Why? Because I need to understand. I need to hear from her how she justified putting Ava in danger. I need to look her in the eye and tell her that she's lost her family because of her choices. And so the next afternoon, Daniel and I sat across from Florence Langston in the county jail's visitation room. But for the first time in a long while, she no longer held the power in the room. We did. Part 5. She looked so much smaller than I remembered. There was a fragility to her that hadn't been there before, as though the weight of her choices had finally started pressing down on her shoulders. Margaret Langston, once so controlling and immovable, sat behind the thick pane of glass in the jail's visitation room, clothed in a wrinkled orange jumpsuit that made her look far older than her years. Thank you for coming, she said softly, her voice no longer carrying its usual sharp edge. We're here because Daniel needed closure, I replied coldly. Not because I have anything left to say to you. Margaret nodded slowly, turning her tired eyes toward her son. I know you're angry with me. I know you hate me right now. Daniel didn't respond right away. He stared at her, the silence stretching between them like a chasm. I don't hate you, Mom, he said at last. But I don't understand you. I don't understand how you could put Ava in danger. How you could lie to me for years, manipulate my life like that. Margaret looked down at her hands, now trembling slightly in her lap. For a long time, she didn't speak. When she finally did, her voice was barely more than a whisper. After your father died, I was terrified. I had no one left but you. And I was so afraid that some woman would come into your life and take you away from me. She stopped, her words trailing off into the air like smoke. Like what? Daniel pressed. Like someone took you away from Dad? We exchanged confused glances, waiting for her to explain. Margaret looked up, tears beginning to roll freely down her cheeks. Your father, he was going to leave me. He found out about the gambling, about the money I'd hidden, about all the lies. He was planning to take you and move across the country to start over. He told me he was done. I felt a tight knot begin to form in my stomach. I begged him to stay, she continued. I told him I'd get help, that I'd change. But I didn't. I never meant to get help. I just got better at hiding it. Daniel's voice cracked. He died of a heart attack, Mom. That's what you told everyone. That's what I believe. Margaret shook her head. It was a heart attack, but it didn't come out of nowhere. The night before he died, he found out I had taken out a second mortgage on the house without telling him. We fought, screamed at each other. He said he was leaving the next morning and taking you with him. Then he collapsed. Right there, he was gone. Daniel went pale. His mouth opened slightly, but no words came. You're saying Dad died because of the stress you caused, he whispered. I'm saying he died because I was selfish, she replied, choking back sobs. Because I couldn't stop. I was addicted, not just to gambling, but to controlling everything around me, including you. Her confession settled between us like a dense fog. Daniel stared at her as if he were seeing a ghost. So all those years, all those women you chased away from me, all the meddling, the drama, the guilt, it was because you were scared of being left alone. Because you couldn't live with the guilt of what you did to Dad. I didn't mean to kill him, she cried. I didn't want any of this, but I couldn't stop myself. I felt a flash of pity, but it was quickly drowned by a wave of something much stronger, anger. Margaret's words weren't just a confession, they were an appeal for sympathy. Even now, she was trying to paint herself as a victim of her own impulses. Margaret, I said sharply, your addiction might explain your behavior, but it doesn't excuse it. You exposed Ava to dangerous people. You made her clean your house like a servant while her cousins played video games. You gambled away the money that should have secured her future. That isn't just selfish. That's reckless. That's criminal. I know, she whispered. I know I've done terrible things, but I'm trying to make it right. The detective said my testimony could help them go after the men who threatened Ava and Owen. That has to count for something. Daniel nodded faintly. It's a start, But Mom, this changes everything. Our relationship, our trust, it's broken. I can't keep pretending everything's okay. I can't keep protecting you while you hurt the people I love. I understand, she said, wiping her face. I just hope, maybe one day, Ava can forgive me. I stood, ready to leave. Ava's going to be just fine. She'll grow up knowing her value isn't tied to how well she pleases other people. She'll know that respect is something earned through honesty, not manipulation. And she'll grow into the kind of woman you never gave her the chance to be. We left the facility without another word. Daniel didn't speak on the drive home. I could see the storm brewing behind his eyes, years of confusion suddenly replaced with cold clarity. His entire understanding of his family had been overturned. You okay? I asked gently. He kept his gaze fixed on the road. I'm just thinking about all the women she drove away. All the love I could have had, the stability, the peace, gone because she was too afraid to be alone. And I never saw it. You were groomed, Daniel, I said, turning toward him. She conditioned you to ignore her faults, to dismiss concerns, to protect her at all costs. You weren't just a son, you were her hostage. But you're free now. But I chose her over you, he said, voice trembling. I chose her over Ava. Yes, you did. And those are choices you'll have to carry. But you're not condemned by them. Recognizing your mistake now means you're finally ready to make better ones in the future. That night, Daniel sat down with Ava for a conversation I never expected to witness. Ava, he said, kneeling beside her, I need to say something important. I owe you an apology. For what, Daddy? For not protecting you the way I should have. For letting Grandma Margaret treat you unfairly. I was scared to stand up to her. But that wasn't right. You deserved better. She looked at him with wide, knowing eyes. It's okay, Daddy. Grandma Margaret scared me sometimes. But I knew you and Mommy would keep me safe. He pulled her into a hug, his voice breaking. From now on, I promise I'll always choose you and Mommy. No one will ever make you feel like you're less important because you're a girl. I know, Daddy, she smiled. Mommy already taught me that. Later that night, after Ava was in bed, Daniel and I had the rawest, most honest conversation of our marriage. I don't know if I can ever completely forgive you for the financial lies, I said quietly, but I can see that you're finally beginning to understand how deep the damage goes. And that means something. I want to fix this, Naomi, he said. I want to be the man you and Ava deserve. Then you'll need to keep choosing us. Even when your mother calls. Even when it gets messy. I will, he said, meeting my eyes. I should have done it years ago, but I'm doing it now. The next morning, I made a call I'd been putting off for weeks. My old college roommate, Aaron Maxwell, was now a forensic accountant. If I was going to hold Margaret accountable, I needed someone who could build a solid case. This is extensive, Aaron said after reviewing the documentation I'd gathered. We're talking identity theft, loan fraud, possibly elder abuse if any of this was done using her late husband's name. And that's just what's evident here. What are my legal options? You could file criminal charges for the identity theft and fraud. And you can cut off all financial support immediately since these debts were incurred without your knowledge or consent. Will it get ugly? Oh, Naomi, he said gravely, it's already ugly, but you'll have the truth on your side. I thought of Ava scrubbing floors while Owen and Ryan played. I thought of Margaret's dismissive smile when I dared question her. I thought of the years she'd spent quietly manipulating us all. I'm ready, I said. Aaron helped me assemble a thorough report, bank statements, loan agreements, property records, and written statements from Gloria Santos and Rachel. The evidence was damning, but what Aaron found next would unravel everything we thought we knew, and it made my blood run cold. Part 6. It turned out Eleanor had been fraudulently listing Ava as a dependent on multiple insurance policies. Somehow, she had gotten hold of Ava's social security number and had been collecting benefits from 3 separate sources, including her late husband's veterans assistance. This is textbook insurance fraud, Aaron said grimly. She's been claiming your daughter lives with her full-time and is financially dependent on her. The scale of it was staggering. Eleanor wasn't just a difficult, controlling mother-in-law clinging to outdated beliefs. She was a career fraudster who had been using her family, especially Lily, as shields and tools for her schemes. With the evidence we had, we could bring her down completely. But I didn't want vengeance, I wanted justice, and I wanted it done right. It took months for the legal process to wind through. Eventually, Eleanor pleaded guilty to identity theft, insurance fraud, and charges connected to the illegal gambling ring. She was sentenced to 18 months in prison, followed by 3 years of probation. The home she'd been living in, technically still in Aunt Florence's name, was sold to help pay restitution. The remaining proceeds went into Ava's college fund, exactly where they should have gone in the first place. Thanks to her full cooperation with law enforcement, 7 members of the Violenti crime family were arrested, including the man who had threatened Ava. During that long year, Daniel and I went to counseling. We had to. The lies had gone too deep, the damage too far-reaching. There were moments when I didn't think we'd make it. But slowly, Daniel began to change. Really change. He took full control of our finances, but with transparency, sharing every detail with me. He severed all ties with Eleanor, aside from the occasional court-mandated check-in, always under supervision. Most importantly, he began to truly see Ava. He saw her brilliance, her potential. He enrolled her in advanced math courses, praised her achievements, and never again implied that her gender made her less worthy of anything. 2 years later, I got an unexpected phone call. Naomi? It's Rachel Monroe. I paused. Rachel, wow, it's been a while. How are you? I'm good, she said with a smile in her voice. Getting married next month, to someone who isn't threatened by my career or my student debt. I laughed. That's wonderful news, Rachel. I wanted to call and thank you, she said more seriously, for doing what I couldn't do all those years ago, for standing up to Eleanor. You protected Ava, but you also saved a lot of other people from becoming her next victims. I blinked. How do you know that? Because Logan's girlfriend left him last month. Eleanor tried pulling the same manipulation she used on me, insinuating she wasn't good enough for the family. But this girl didn't fall for it. She told Logan exactly what Eleanor said, and for the first time, he saw it. He finally saw her for what she really is. I could picture it, Logan's face, confused and hurt, realizing the woman who raised him had spent her life playing people like chess pieces. What happened next? I asked. He moved out of her place, got his own apartment. He's even in therapy now, trying to understand how years of manipulation shaped how he treated women. He told Daniel that seeing what Eleanor did to Ava made him realize he never wanted to repeat that pattern. The ripple effect was real. Standing up to Eleanor had sent shockwaves through the family that took years to fully emerge. Daniel eventually became the husband I'd always hoped he'd be, firm in his boundaries, unwilling to let his mother's needs come before ours. As for Eleanor, her gambling addiction never really loosened its grip. Even after prison, she faced new legal trouble, enough to keep her too preoccupied to continue pulling strings. And Ava, she blossomed. She knew her worth, knew she was loved for who she was, not how well she scrubbed someone's floor. 5 years after that day, I walked into Eleanor's house and found Ava cleaning while the boys played. Ava came home from school with a story that made my heart swell. Mom, she said, dropping her backpack, something happened at lunch. What's up, sweetie? This boy, Aiden, told me and Maya we couldn't play basketball because girls aren't good at sports. He told us to go play with dolls. I felt an old, familiar anger rise in my chest, echoes of Eleanor's cruel words about girls needing to know their place. What did you do? Ava grinned. I told him he was wrong. Then Maya and I challenged them to a game. We won, 12-8. After that, Aiden apologized and asked if we wanted to be on his team next week. I pulled her into a hug. I'm so proud of you. You stood up for yourself and your friend. You taught me that, she said. You showed me that just because someone says something hurtful about girls, it doesn't mean it's true. And that even if it's family, I don't have to accept being treated that way. That night, as I tucked her in, I thought about the long road behind us. Standing up to Eleanor had nearly cost me my marriage and shattered extended family ties, but I would do it all again, because Ava would never doubt her value. She would never learn that respect must be earned through submission. She would demand it, because she knew she deserved it. Eleanor had tried to teach her place. Ava learned to claim her space. And that, in the end, was the sweetest justice of all. Eleanor served her full sentence. She now lives alone in a tiny apartment and works part-time at a discount store to pay restitution. The woman who once sneered about traditional values now spends her days stocking shelves and attending mandatory gambling recovery meetings. She's written letters, asking to see Ava. We haven't responded. Ava is 13 now, thriving in her AP classes, building a future rooted in confidence and integrity. She's made it clear she has no interest in reconnecting with the grandmother who once tried to shrink her down to nothing. Last month, while we were making dinner, she asked, Mom, do you ever feel bad about what happened to Grandma Eleanor? I considered the question. I feel sad she made choices that hurt so many people, but I don't regret protecting you from her. Not for a second. I'm glad you did, Ava said, stirring sauce. Some of my friends have family who make them feel small, but they're too afraid to speak up. I tell them what you taught me, that family should make you feel safe and valued, not small and invisible. What do they say when you tell them that? They usually ask how you found the courage to go against your own family. I smiled. And what do you tell them? I tell them you didn't see it as going against family. You saw it as protecting family. There's a difference. Looking at my daughter, strong, kind, and unafraid, I knew the truth. Eleanor had tried to teach Ava obedience. Instead, Ava learned resilience. And that, more than anything, was the legacy I wanted for her.